A proper core brace is one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of training. Most people are taught to just squeeze their abs, bear down, and hold their breath, and then just do it harder as the lift gets tougher. The problem is that strategy actually locks you up, kills your mobility, and works against your body's natural mechanics. A real brace isn't about force, it's about positioning and pressure. If you can line up your ribs and your pelvis in a stacked position, exhale fully, and feel your deep core muscles like your obliques and your transverse abdominis activate, that's when you unlock the kind of brace that supports both strength and movement. This kind of bracing increases your movement options. It improves stability and muscle activation, and it makes you a more efficient lifter, and this means you get more done with less effort. And here's the best part. Learning how to manage pressure in a stacked brace is the key to combining both mobility and strength. If you get this right, you'll stop feeling like a stiff refrigerator in the gym and start moving smoother, stronger, and way more fluidly. One of the easiest and most effective ways to start finding and training a good core brace is on the ground, because it gives us tons of external feedback. It allows us in a hook lying position like this to find our foot contacts, heels, balls of the big toes, and the balls of the pinky toes. Might need to adjust your feet to find that. It allows us to feel our PSIS, which is the back of our pelvis, and that allows us to get the pelvis in a relatively neutral position, and then find the area between our shoulder blades on our rib cage with a nice tall spine. That allows us to find a relatively neutral position of our rib cage so that we can start to breathe diaphragmatically and slowly get the ribs and the hips to line up to turn on and activate those deep core muscles, the obliques, and then the transverse abdominis. Once you find those ground contacts, we're going to start the breathing pattern that you've already reviewed in your diaphragmatic breathing video. We're going to inhale very softly through our nose. We're going to exhale long and slow through the mouth. And since we're trying to find a little bit more core tension and pressure and start to build that, instead of relaxing with an open mouth and sighing like we're fogging a mirror, we're going to purse our lips like we're blowing through a straw, and that's going to allow us to feel a little bit more of these deep abs. So once you find your contacts, push your foot contacts into the ground just a little bit and think about kind of pulling your heels towards your hips, and you'll feel your hamstrings turn on without the glutes kicking on. And in that position, you'll feel like your pelvis is very stable and neutral as long as you still feel your PSIS. And then we're going to work on inhaling and exhaling so we can get the ribs mobile and get them moving. While you're doing this and thinking about finding core pressure, you want to make sure that you don't tuck your chin and drop your chest like this. So think about aiming your chin towards the ceiling so we can open up that airway. That allows airflow into the upper rib cage, which allows more movement and expansion 360 degrees like we want when we're diaphragmatically breathing. And that allows more mobility of the rib cage so that when we exhale, we get more of a drop that lines up the ribs with the hips in a way that biases the activation of our obliques. That's really important. And doing it on the ground, nailing it on the ground and getting very good at this skill is key before you start standing, stacking, and setting up your lifts. So I'm going to inhale very slowly. Get that 360 degrees expansion in the rib cage, and then I'm going to exhale very slowly and steadily, just letting the air fall out through a straw. When you start the exhale, it starts at the pelvic floor, and I want you to imagine that you know your transverse abdominis is in the shape of a corset. It wraps around the abdominals or the midsection all the way around. And so I want you to think of the pelvic floor starting to rise, the diaphragm starting to rise, and the transverse abdominis just dropping into place. It is not like a core vacuum or an abdominal vacuum that you would suck in, but it naturally does that on its own. So as you begin the exhale and it starts at the pelvic floor, it kind of wraps your abdomen up like a corset or zips up. So think of it zipping as you start your exhale from the bottom up. And as I begin that process, I get all of my air out, and then I pause for 1 to 2 seconds. So we've already trained that in our other breathing drills. And I can start to feel that these start to turn on. If you have not done this a lot before, that is going to be a foreign feeling. You may not be able to connect to that. It might just take some time. That could indicate a few things. Your pelvis isn't in the right spot, you're trying to force it, or your ribs are just really stiff, and you could spend some more time feeling that movement and trying to line those things up. Inhale through your nose, blow through your mouth through a straw. Zipping things up. staying nice and tall, and repeat this process until you start to feel these obliques and the transverse abdominis start to turn on a little bit more and a little bit more. Some things to consider. If you're trying to find tension and you notice that the area at the top of your rib cage is turning on, that's our six-pack abs. That's the most surface abs. We want to avoid that as much as possible. Staying nice and tall, even if you feel like your ribs are flared, that's going to be the best way to keep that off. So we want this area nice and spongy. And as we exhale through that straw, we want to feel the abs come in just like this. And you want to think about doing maybe 3, 4, 5 breaths to really find that tension. And then another important piece of stacking is making sure that the rib cage is kind of sinking back towards the ground when you're exhaling. And a great way to do that is softly reach your arms up. You can start with a soft low reach like this with my elbows pointed towards my knees. That brings my shoulder blades to my sides just like this, which takes them, wraps them around, allows some expansion of my inhales to go towards the ground. And when that happens, it's a little bit easier to line the ribs up. So if you're super flared here and you notice that your shoulder blades are in the way, if you reach, that drops the ribs down and opens up the back of your ribs so that now you get more expansion in the back, which allows the top to drop down, line them up, and there are your obliques. So a soft reach here is a great way to start. Think about every time you exhale, your elbows get a little bit further away from you, which takes your shoulder blades with it. So watch me here. Nice long exhale through a straw. Elbows slowly move away. The shoulder blades follow the elbows. I'm relaxing my traps. Everything's moving down and around. And I start to feel a little bit of the serratus and the intercostals, which could also be considered lower respiratory muscles. They're going to connect to those obliques. It's going to help wrap the rib cage down in that stacked position without the six-pack, and then we're going to get even more deep abs. So practice finding that connection and then holding on to it. We're not trying to squeeze it or bear down, because when I do that, you notice I get some squeezing at the top of the abs, and I also lose height in the spine. Very important part of the stack and finding that deep core is staying tall with that neutral hips and ribs position. This will take some time to train, but as you build your awareness of those deep core muscles and you're able to slowly inhale into that brace and fill that cylinder, then you're going to be a lot more mobile and a lot more stable during those more complex lifts. You got to master it on the ground before we can even start to set you up and do your checklist standing. It all starts right here. That's how it's done, guys. Very nice, I like.